Hey everybody, this is Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with Chess.com's Game of the Day. And today's game is a blitz game between Dubov and Sarin. Dubov actually, as the time of this recording, today turned 24 years old. Although sometimes it takes him a couple of days to, get it on the YouTube channel. Nihal Sarin, boy, he's not old. He's probably 14, 15, and he's already over 2,600. Dubov's higher rated in slow chess, but okay, it's a blitz game. So this is from the Abu Dhabi Blitz that they played last week, which had, I think, over 1,000 titled players. And Sarin actually finished in the top 8 and made it to the playoffs. Okay, but they had a really exciting game, so you're going to like it. Let's have a look. It was a Karo Khan, and Dubov played the advanced variation, which I personally think is the most testing. I play the Karo Khan myself on occasion, and I think e5 is the least likely move I want to face. Let's put it that way. Now, most grandmasters play bishop f5. That's always been the most common move. I think I've played bishop f5 once or twice, but I normally play c5. That's what Sarin played here. This is much more aggressive. So we try to attack the center right away, although, black is losing a tempo. So the way to punish this isn't for white to play defensive. White's to open the position since black has decided not to develop any of his pieces. So you take on c5. That's considered the best move. You can also play knight f3, c4. Sometimes they play c3, but taking on c5 is the most common way to play. This is where the big divergence comes in. You can play knight c6 or e6. When you play e6, you're giving up on moving your bishop out. And when you play knight c6, you think, maybe I'll move my bishop out later. So you can play either one. And you actually should know a ton of theory to play either one. It's very sharp. And if you're black, you got to pick one, and the one you like, and play that. And problem with having white in this particular line is you have to know e6 and knight c6. So a lot of players with white against c5 don't take on c5 because they don't want to learn both of them. Okay, so he played e6, just wants to take on c5 right away. That's fine. Knight f3 takes. And I want to remind you, this is from a blitz tournament, so this is a blitz game. So don't be too hard on the players. Bishop d3. And this is very, sort of French-like. It's like an advanced French, except white's not trying to keep his big pawn center. He just takes on c5. And his advantage is he's up a tempo because black played c6 and c5 instead of c5 right away. Otherwise, it's very similar to a French defense. Okay, castles. Now, here, black can play very sharp, complicated, scary with f6. Never play f6. Or just develop a piece with knight ge7. The engine prefers f6, although, in a blitz game, you might not want to open the center when you haven't castled yet and your king is still there. But maybe in the future, when Sarin studies the game, he'll decide that he prefers f6. Okay, knight bd2. It's very common to play knight d2, knight b3 attacking the bishop, and then get the bishop out. And even now that d4 is open, instead of white having a pawn chain in the center, white can use d4 for his knight. He can try to put a knight on d4. Very common idea. Okay, knight g6, getting his knight out of the way. Obviously, for those of you who know what the Greek gift is, I've made a video on that, or two. If we castle, this is a situation where the Greek gift is actually pretty reasonable. We take, you don't have to take, you can. Knight g5 check. And you can almost never play king g8 in these positions because queen h5 just delivers mate pretty quickly. So king g6 is the only move. And then knight here is probably best. That way the knight's defended twice. h4, h5 is an idea. Knight h4 is an idea. Queen d3 is an idea. I don't want to have black here in a blitz game or in a slow game. The engine says black is okay if he plays perfectly. But if he doesn't play perfectly, he gets mated. I think with 2 or 3 minutes on your clock, probably Good idea to avoid this. Okay, so instead of castling and allowing that, it's not even necessarily clear that white would have played the sacrifice, but in a blitz game, I'm playing it every day. Okay, so he played knight g6, which obviously puts more pressure on the center. Maybe the knight can even come in here, and it blocks, bishop from h7. Okay, knight b3, as I explained earlier, bishop b6. And here, obviously, this pawn is under some attack. So you can play either queen e2 or rook e1. He decided to play rook e1. And they're both, it's pretty similar. Castles, we can't play the Greek gift anymore, so castles is fine. Queen e2. This is a very reasonable game for a blitz game. There's been, I think, no mistakes. Positions about equal. Chances for both sides. So very, very good game. Okay, now if you're one of my students, you have to look away because never play f6. And unfortunately, in the Caro-Kann and in the French defense, it's common for black to play f6 because that pawn's pretty annoying. And it's nice to open up the f file too, especially with the bishop on b6. Okay, you have to take because there's just too many black pieces on the e pawn. Okay, queen takes. So we doubled up on the f file. We have pressure on the diagonal. We have two center pawns to 0. Our knights, have control of a lot of the active center squares. Problem is this bishop's not very good, and this rook's not very good. And what black would like to do is activate further and hopefully get his center going. Okay, and again, the engine says it's about equal. Bishop g5, getting his bishop out. And the only way for black to say, no, you can't play bishop g5, that loses a pawn, is to take the pawn. Nothing wrong with taking the pawn. It depends what kind of player you are. It's a blitz game, so you got to be a pretty universal player and play all kinds of positions. So to punish him, he has to take the pawn. So he did. Sometimes you punish yourself when you try to punish the opponent. That happens. Rook b1. The queen can't go back to f6. The queen doesn't have a lot of retreating squares. If he's in the mood, he could trap his queen further with queen takes a2. I think only an engine would do that. And the engine says that it's playable. And it also says the other moves are playable. But okay, it's nice to win a pawn, but when you lose your queen, you have to resign. So you got to be really careful you don't lose your queen here. He played, I think, the safest move, queen c3. I think that's the least likely move to, lose your queen right away, since it's closer to the center. On the other hand, there's the squares that you can retreat to. I think that's all of them, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 6 of them are covered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the only square that you have that's safe is here. Obviously, bishop d2 prevents that, but then a queen has f6. So we're still pretty safe for black, or so he thought. Bishop d2 anyway. Queen f6. Bishop g5, always repeat. And Nihal Sarin plays for the win. He's got his queen out. He's up a pawn. He doesn't see any risk. I mean, if the players play queen c3, bishop d2, and repeated for a draw, probably this wouldn't be the game of the day. Okay, so he played queen f7, playing for the win. And as I said earlier in the video, white wants to open up the position because white has a lead in development and black hadn't gotten developed yet, which is still the case. So he played c4. c4 is a reasonable move. h6 attacking the bishop. Bishop e3 is a good move. Knight f4 is good, getting the two bishops. Okay, so black has the two bishops and an extra pawn. Although again, it's not really getting out there. Okay, he played rook to d1. That's a good move. Finally, Nihal plays bishop d7. But I'm not going to complain about his play. He was busy. Okay, he's got two bishops. He has an extra pawn. And after he did all of that and got a very good position, now he develops his bishop. Okay, in this position, white played bishop b1, which is an excellent move. He wants to put his queen on the diagonal and give pressure. When you see all these pieces on the queen side, you start thinking about the king. So white's pieces are all excellent. He's attacking the d pawn. He's got the open e file. He's got this nice diagonal. And black has 2 bishops and an extra pawn. So a very double-edged kind of position. It's a very good position. Now, there's a very long, complicated line, which was not played, which starts with queen takes c4. And then everybody takes everything. Every piece is hanging. And here, black's up a pawn. Black has 2 pawns hanging. But since this bishop is really nice, we have an open file. We are up a pawn right now. Black's a little bit better here. So black could have done this, but instead of trading everything with queen c4, black played rook f6. So he can triple on the f file. His king could run away in case there's some diagonal tricks. Queen c2 was played. And now he played the move g6. You don't have to play g6, because after queen h7 check, you could move your king. But he played g6 anyway. Okay, reasonable. Takes, takes, takes. All right. So now white's equalized material. Black still has the 2 bishops. And rook takes d5 started a big tactical thing where both sides, having less than a minute on their clock, didn't play perfectly, but we get a really exciting game for you at home. The engine wants to play rook e8, getting his last piece into the game, or bishop e6, saving his bishop. But he played much more interesting with knight b4. Knight b4 is a good move. Obviously, it threatens the rook and the queen. White correctly played queen d1. And the problem that black has, if black takes this rook, which he didn't do, queen takes, forks the king and bishop. That's the problem with having a loose piece. And rook f7 would fail to bishop takes g6. So this position is very good for white. Okay, so Sarin didn't take the rook. He played bishop c6. So I said black has the 2 bishops, and now the bishops are looking pretty good. In fact, all of black's pieces look pretty good. Okay, and yet the engine says it's equal because the engine calculates a line starting with rook to d2, where there's a lot of trades. Okay, and that line's rook d2, takes, 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 takes. And the problem with taking on f3 is I take on g6. And the material here is so limited that the engine thinks it's a draw. Okay, it makes sense. Most people probably would want to have black because white's pawn structure here is so bad. But okay, white has the rooks in the center. White has pressure on the g-pawn. So this knight is semi-trapped. It has to go back to c6. In fact, knight c6 is an engine move. So the position's about equal. And instead of that, white blundered. Instead of playing this move rook to d2, he made the losing move. Okay, and sometimes, as we all know, the losing move wins. It ends up winning, even though it shouldn't have. And he played the move rook e4, forking the queen and the knight. And this was a big misunderstanding of the position. If he had played rook d2, probably would have maintained equality, and now he's just losing. So this might be a time you'd want to pause the video, if you're so inclined, and black has a winning move here. And it gives him an easily winning position, which, well, we'll see what happened later. So what should black play in this position? Now, as most of you know, 2 rooks is usually better than a queen, and it is especially in this position. I mean, these rooks are great, and potentially these rooks are going to be really good. And the queens are not doing everything yet. So black has the move knight takes d5, which protects his queen, and now he gets 2 rooks for a queen. Took this rook, and with these bishops and this knight and this rook here and the other rook coming, black is completely winning here. Okay, and I mean, white doesn't really even have any counterplay. I can't suggest white to continue to attack or anything. So white blocked the bishop on b6 and tried to trade the bishop. That seems pretty reasonable. Rook to d8, pinning the knight. Queen b3 check. Bishop d5. Queen a4. And now many moves win. I mean, a lot of moves are winning pretty easily. And in this position, black could just continue to attack. He could play rook c8, trying to come into c1. He could play bishop takes d4 first. he could play bishop f7, releasing the power of the rook on d8, so that puts more pressure on his position. For example, after bishop f7, black would be threatening to take the knight and then take the knight again because of the knight e2 fork. Okay, I'll just give you an example here. And knight e2 check wins the queen, for example. Okay. So all of those moves are good for black. Bishop f7, bishop takes, rook here. He can't really mess this up. He played king g7. There's no reason to play king g7. It's all right. Doesn't blunder anything. Okay. He played h4, which is okay. He's losing, so any kind of counterattack is going to be good. Knight takes g2. This is a nice tactical move. You can't take the knight because after bishop takes d4, man, those are some good bishops. And the tactical justification is you can't take because bishop takes knight wins your queen. And you can't take with the knight because it's illegal. Okay, so this is too much to handle. So he played queen to b4. He wants to come into e7 with check. Rook to d7, good. Knight e5, which attacks the rook, but I mean, it makes this knight more defended, so it's not great. Okay, and he played bishop takes g6. So the position's super complicated for a blitz game. In a slow game, I'm sure Sarin would win. Okay, now Sarin makes the first of many mistakes. He played the move knight f4, attacking the bishop on g6, but he should have played knight takes h4. That not only attacks the bishop and wins a pawn, but it stops knight f5 check because the knight's on h4. So that would have been the easiest way to win. Knight f4 is now no longer winning. Now here, white played knight f5 check, which is an excellent move, and threatens the knight on f4. I'm not sure if he didn't see knight f5 check or he thought he had a mate he didn't have. Also possible. Again, if he plays knight takes h4, he's defending f5, so that stops that. So this is his first really bad move, knight f4. Knight f5 check. It's exciting for us. Both sides are getting checkmated. The minor pieces seem really strong for both sides. Okay, now, well, you can't give this away, so you have to play rook takes. That's fine. Bishop takes. Rook c1 check. King h2. This is all correct play. Check him up the board. Maybe Sarin thought he had a mate here when he played knight f4 and then realized he didn't. Maybe. Okay. And now black made the losing move, and then both sides started making losing moves, making it exciting for us. Obviously, if it was white to move, white would play queen e7 check, which is pretty annoying. So the only good move here for black is bishop d8. Not only does it stop queen e7 check, but it threatens h4. Rook takes h4 checkmate. And after bishop d8, knight to g6, defending the h1, the engine says this is a forced draw. Pretty funny line, actually. And then draw, perpetual. That would still be pretty much of a game of the day, I think. Okay. Instead of bishop d8, he played rook g1 check right away, which is the losing move. Now we play king h5, and shockingly, our king is safe. The knight on e5 makes sure the bishop can't check, and the queen is stopping knight f4 check, and the pawn is stopping knight g3 check. So black doesn't have a good check, and white does have a good check. Queen e7 check would be winning. And in fact, white is winning here. Truth hurts. Okay, and he stopped king f6, stopped queen e7 check by playing king f6. Okay, and now by playing bishop c5. King f6 is actually the engine move. And white's still winning, but bishop c5 is a tricky human move. And this is another time you should stop your video. In this position, white has one move that wins. Every other move loses. By the way, this is very common at the grandmaster level. A lot of times when my students are playing, they'll complain to me, well, I was watching this grandmaster game and the guy was +5 and he lost. When my opponent's +5, They just win easily. I don't understand why that is. I'm going to tell you why it is. When low-rated players are playing and it's +5, sometimes that's because they're just down a rook. There's no compensation. Every move is +5. Every move wins. Okay. Now, when grandmasters play, usually the reason one side is completely winning is the other side didn't see a move. He missed a move. There's 20, there's 30 legal moves, and he missed one. If he had seen that move, he wouldn't have gone into the variation. That's actually the case here. White has one move that wins, and every other move loses. There's a lot of moves here. So pause the video if you'd like and try to find the winning move for white. Well, if you found the winning move, you're better than Dubov because he did not. The winning move, well, obviously your queen's attacked, and you have to stop knight f4 checkmate. So the winning move is queen d2. Okay, that not only threatens the knight, but it threatens queen takes h6. Queen d2 is winning. It's completely winning. There's no real defense to this pawn. And white just starts checkmating black with all of his pieces. Queen d2 is the winning move. I think both sides had less than 10 seconds. So he blundered with queen a4. If you suggested queen a4, don't feel bad. So did Dubov. Okay, now black has a move that wins, and he didn't find it, and instead he blundered. What he has to do, he has to get the queen away from f4, so he can play knight f4 mate, and he wants to stop queen d7 check. And he can do that with one move. Do you see it? It's b5. That stops queen d7 check. It attacks the queen, and the queen has no square that's not hanging to stop knight f4. After b5, black is completely winning. He has to play queen here check and trade his queen for the rook and go to a piece down ending. So b5 is winning, but with no time on his clock, he missed it. And he played king f6, which also stops queen d7 check. Knight d7 check, another blunder. Now, this is actually funny. The way for black to win is to go back to g7. And the reason is bishop f3 is winning, and if we stop that with knight here, then b5 wins again. It's the same position. That's actually sort of funny. But instead he played king takes, queen c2 check, and all of black's pieces are hanging several different ways, and there's no more mating net. There's no checkmate. So now you just lose. And that's unfortunate. And he resigned. And white won the game. So both sides were winning that game, but when they both had less than 10 seconds left, you see what happened. Blitz chess is a tough game, even for super grandmasters. And those are both guys that in the future, they're both going to be top 10 in the world. Really exciting game for the Blitz tournament that was over 1,000 titled players. Just unbelievable. And Sarin, the player with black, was able to make it to the final 8. Well, this is Grandmaster Ben Finegold for Chess.com. Don't forget to click on the chessboard for more videos and see more Chess.com game of the day. Bye, everyone.